At my ex-husband Arthur's extravagant second wedding, he introduced me to his new bride's family as merely an old acquaintance. His entire family, who once treated me as their own, looked through me as if I were invisible. I simply smiled, a silent promise forming in my heart. Years later, when everything he built crumbled, he found himself utterly alone. This is my story of betrayal, resilience, and unexpected turns. Like, share, and tell me where you're listening from. My life with Arthur Sterling was once a meticulously crafted masterpiece, or so I believed. From the outside, we were the epitome of success. He, a rising star in the corporate world, charismatic and driven. I, Eleanor Vance, his supportive wife, the woman who managed our elegant home, hosted impeccable dinner parties, and volunteered for all the right charities. We had it all. A sprawling house in the prestigious Heights neighborhood, 2 luxury cars, summer vacations in Europe, and a social calendar that always seemed full. Our friends often commented on our perfect partnership, on how lucky we were to have found each other. And for a long time, I truly felt lucky. Arthur's ambition was a force of nature. He worked tirelessly, often late into the night, fueled by a relentless drive to climb higher, earn more, achieve greater recognition. I admired that about him, even as it sometimes meant sacrificing our personal time together. I saw my role as his anchor, the calm center to his whirlwind existence. I handled every detail of our domestic life, freeing him to focus solely on his career. I proofread his presentations, advised on his wardrobe, and even remembered the birthdays of his most important clients. I was invested, not just in our marriage, but in his success, believing it was our success. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the cracks began to show. His late nights became more frequent, his explanations vaguer. The passionate conversations we once shared dwindled into polite exchanges about household chores or social obligations. When I tried to bridge the gap, to talk about us, he would dismiss my concerns with a wave of his hand, attributing it to stress from work. "It's just a tough quarter, Eleanor," he'd say, his eyes already drifting back to his phone. "Things will calm down." But they never did. He grew increasingly secretive, guarding his phone, taking calls in hushed tones behind closed doors. My gut, once a reliable compass, started to spin wildly, pointing in every direction but the right one. The revelation, when it came, wasn't a dramatic confrontation but a slow, agonizing unraveling. It started with a forgotten email open on his laptop, a string of intimate messages with a name I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I read them, the words slicing through me like shards of glass. My heart, once a warm, steady beat, felt as though it had been plunged into an ice bath. Then came the financial discovery. A hidden account, drained of a significant portion of our joint savings, investments I knew nothing about, and debts that suddenly appeared from nowhere. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was a calculated act of financial deception that left me reeling. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had systematically dismantled our shared future. The divorce was brutal. Arthur, always so charming and persuasive, used every tactic imaginable to minimize his liabilities. He painted me as an extravagant spendthrift, an unsupportive wife who hadn't contributed meaningfully to his success. The truth was, my contributions, though not monetary, were the bedrock of his career. But in the eyes of the law, and with his cunning lawyers, it meant little. I walked away with barely a fraction of what I was entitled to, my financial future shattered. The house, the cars, the illusion of our perfect life, all gone. I was left adrift, not just emotionally devastated, but practically bankrupt. The ensuing months were a haze of grief and despair. I felt stripped bare, not just of my possessions, but of my identity. Who was Eleanor Vance without Arthur Sterling? Without the house, the social circle, the defined role I had played for so long? I spent days curled up on the sofa in my now empty living room, the echoes of a life I no longer recognized bouncing off the stark walls. The shame was suffocating, the betrayal a constant bitter taste in my mouth. I had believed in a dream, invested my whole self in it, only to have it dissolve into a nightmare. My social standing plummeted faster than a stone thrown into a well. The friends who had once flocked to our dinner parties vanished, their loyalty shifting with Arthur's new status and new wife. It was a stark lesson in the superficiality of some connections. But amid the wreckage, two beacons of unwavering support emerged. Sarah Maxwell, my oldest and dearest friend, was a lifeline. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She offered practical help, a shoulder to cry on, and an unshakable belief in my ability to get through this. She cooked meals, listened for hours, and gently nudged me towards small acts of self-care. And then there was Clara Jenkins, my neighbor from down the street, a sweet, elderly woman with a twinkle in her eye and a heart of gold. Clara, who had known Arthur and me since we moved into the Heights, saw through the facade. She would bring over plates of homemade cookies, sit with me on the porch, and share stories of her own life's challenges, reminding me that adversity was not the end, but often a catalyst for something new. Her quiet wisdom and genuine affection were a balm to my wounded spirit. With Sarah and Clara's unwavering encouragement, I slowly began to pick up the pieces. The sprawling house, once a symbol of our success, became a reminder of my failure. I knew I couldn't stay. Selling it, even for a fraction of its worth, was a painful necessity. I found a small, cozy apartment on the outskirts of town, a far cry from my former grandeur, but it was mine. It was a blank canvas, a chance to start fresh, unburdened by the ghosts of Arthur and our past. As I packed boxes, sifting through years of memories, a different kind of memory surfaced. I stumbled upon an old, faded photograph. Me, young and carefree, laughing with a man whose smile could light up a room. Daniel Thorne. My first love, from college days, before Arthur, before the ambition and the polished facades. We had lost touch years ago, our paths diverging as life pulled us in different directions. A wistful pang struck me. Daniel represented a simpler time, a pure, uncomplicated affection I hadn't realized I missed until now. Looking at the photo, then around my emptying house, a flicker ignited within me. It wasn't anger, not yet, but a quiet, stubborn resolve. I had been knocked down, stripped bare, but I wasn't broken. I was Eleanor Vance, and it was time to reclaim my life, to redefine who I was, not as Arthur's wife, but as myself. This small apartment, this new beginning, was not a step down, but a step forward. Sleep, a gentle visitor, seemed to bypass my new apartment entirely. The silence of the night, once a comfort, now felt like an empty cavern, amplifying the echoes of my past. Lying awake, I let my mind drift, a current pulling me back, further and further, until I found myself standing at the precipice of a choice made decades ago. It was a choice that had shaped everything, leading me inexorably to this moment of solitude. I was 23 when I met Arthur Sterling. My childhood had been a tumultuous landscape of parental arguments, financial instability, and constant uncertainty. When Arthur entered my life, he seemed like the embodiment of everything I craved: confidence, ambition, and a persuasive certainty that he could provide a stable, secure future. He was a whirlwind of charm and promises, painting vivid pictures of a life free from worry, a life of comfort and respectability. I was drawn to his strength, the way he seemed to take charge, and for a while, I genuinely believed he was my protector, my rock. Initially, his attention felt like devotion. He called constantly, insisted on knowing my whereabouts, and made grand gestures. But slowly, subtly, this devotion began to twist. It morphed into suspicion, then control. My opinions were gently corrected, my choices subtly guided, my friendships scrutinized. I learned to censor myself, to anticipate his reactions, to shrink parts of myself, to fit into the mold he was creating for me. It was like living under a constant, invisible pressure, slowly flattening my spirit. And then, there was Daniel Thorne. My mind often wandered back to him, especially in these quiet, vulnerable hours. Daniel was my first love, a few years my senior, steady and kind. With Daniel, I felt seen, truly seen, not managed. He listened, genuinely listened, to my dreams and fears, validating them without judgment. He didn't try to change me. He simply cherished who I was. I remember one summer, I was 19, barefoot in the cool grass behind his college dorm. The air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle and possibility. We lay there, side by side, his hand gently tracing patterns on my arm, talking for hours about everything and nothing. In that moment, with the sun warm on my skin and Daniel's quiet presence beside me, I believed in a love that could last a lifetime, a love that was gentle and real. We dreamed of simple things: a small house, meaningful work, a life built on shared laughter and understanding. It felt authentic, boundless. But my parents, scarred by their own financial struggles, saw Daniel differently. He was an artist, still finding his footing, full of passion but lacking in what they considered prospects. They urged me to consider my future, to marry someone stable, someone who could provide the security they never had. Their voices, laced with fear and concern, burrowed deep into my young mind. They presented Arthur as the logical choice, the safe harbor. He had a promising career, a clear path, and an air of success. I convinced myself that their pragmatic advice was wisdom, that stability was more important than the exhilarating, yet uncertain path with Daniel. It was a stark choice, one that now, decades later, still pricked at my conscience. Marriage over risk, security over passion. I walked away from Daniel, a piece of my heart tearing off with each step. I convinced myself it was the adult decision, the responsible one. The early years of my marriage to Arthur were, on the surface, bearable. We had our daughter, Emily, a bright, curious child who brought immense joy into my life. For a time, her laughter filled the house, drowning out the growing silences between Arthur and me. I focused on her, on creating the perfect home, convincing myself that this duty-built happiness was enough. I had made my bed, and now I would lie in it and make it as comfortable as possible. Then, the stress began to manifest itself in Arthur's habits. His drinking started subtly. A glass of whiskey to unwind after work. Then two. Then a bottle. His cutting words, once rare, became more frequent, dismissed as phases or tiredness. But these phases stretched into decades, becoming the fabric of our daily life. The man who had promised security became the source of my greatest insecurity. I became an expert at reading Arthur's moods, anticipating the storm before it broke. I learned to soothe his temper with carefully chosen words, or to disappear into myself, fading into silence during his rages. I perfected the art of walking on eggshells, each day a delicate ballet of avoidance. I made excuses for him, for us, for the life we were living. Emily, my precious daughter, bore witness to too much of it. I remember hearing her muffled cries from her room during the shouting matches, her small body trembling. I would go to her, hold her close, and whisper assurances that everything would be all right, even as my own heart screamed that it wouldn't be. Those lies, told to protect her, now echoed as hollow condemnations in my mind. I grew adept at hiding the bruises, both visible and invisible. Hiding the tears that streamed in the solitude of the bathroom. Hiding the truth from neighbors who only saw Arthur's polished public mask, the successful businessman, the charming host. They saw what he wanted them to see, and I played my part in the charade. Deep inside, I carried the wound of Daniel, the life I might have had. It was a world closed to me, a road not taken, and the regret was a constant, low thrum beneath the surface of my manufactured contentment. Now, at 65, divorced and dispossessed, the weight of those youthful choices felt crushing. The cracks in my marriage weren't new. They had been there from the beginning, papered over with promises and illusions of stability. I had chosen certainty over authenticity, and I had paid the price. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the world outside was still slumbering, I felt the presence of my younger self. She stood there, a ghostly figure with bright, hopeful eyes, looking at me, the woman I had become. And in that poignant silence, a whisper of defiance stirred within me. Perhaps, I thought, she wasn't entirely gone. Perhaps there was still a flicker of that passionate, barefoot girl, waiting to be rediscovered. The fragile peace of my new apartment was shattered by a familiar sound. Heavy, uneven footsteps echoing down the hallway. My chest tightened instinctively, a primal warning system honed over decades. It was Arthur. He wasn't supposed to know where I lived. The thought was a fresh stab of fear, cold and sharp. Before I could even formulate a plan, a violent pounding erupted on my door. "Eleanor, open this damn door." His voice, slurred and thick with drink, was a cruel echo of the man who once whispered sweet nothings. My hands trembled as I cautiously unlatched the deadbolt, opening the door just a crack. It was a futile gesture. With a sudden surge of force, Arthur shoved his way inside, nearly knocking me off my feet. His face was a mask of furious contempt, flushed an angry red. The stale scent of whiskey and resentment filled my small living room, making my stomach churn. "You think you can ignore me?" he snarled, his eyes blazing. "Pretend I don't exist? After everything I did for you? I made you, Eleanor. Without me, you're nothing." Each word was a lash, designed to cut deep, to remind me of the power he believed he still held over me. He gestured around my modest apartment with a dismissive sweep of his hand, as if its humble size was further proof of my worthlessness. Just then, a door across the hall creaked open. Clara Jenkins, my kind neighbor, stood framed in her doorway, her gaze calm but direct. "Everything all right, Eleanor?" she asked, her voice steady and clear, cutting through Arthur's belligerent rant like a knife. Arthur stiffened, momentarily thrown off balance by the unexpected intrusion. His bluster deflated, replaced by a flash of annoyance. He snapped at Clara. "Mind your own business, old woman." But Clara, unfazed, stepped a little further into the hall. "This is my business when it sounds like someone is being harassed," she replied, her voice gaining a surprising edge of steel. "If I hear shouting again, Arthur, I'll call the police. Understand?" Her eyes held his, an unspoken challenge passing between them. For a moment, he looked as though he might retort, but something in Clara's determined stance, or perhaps the implication of police involvement, made him back down. He gave a dismissive grunt, turning his glare back to me. Clara gave me a reassuring nod, then slowly retreated back into her apartment, leaving her door slightly ajar. As soon as her door clicked shut, Arthur's composure cracked again. He lowered his voice, but the venom in his tone was palpable. "Don't you dare make me look like a fool in front of her," he hissed, grabbing my arm, his grip surprisingly tight. "Don't you ever think you're above me?" A strange calm, born of exhaustion and a lifetime of his abuse, settled over me. For so long, I had cowered, had shrunk, had allowed his words to define my reality. But in that moment, with Clara's intervention still fresh in my mind, a fragile spark ignited within me. I forced myself to meet his angry gaze, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my eyes locked on his. "You can't scare me anymore, Arthur," I whispered, the words barely audible, yet resounding with a power I hadn't known I possessed. My voice trembled, betraying the fear still coiling in my stomach, but I didn't look away. His eyes widened fractionally in surprise, a flicker of genuine shock crossing his face. It was a fleeting moment, quickly replaced by his characteristic cold laugh. "You're pathetic, Eleanor," he sneered, releasing my arm with a disgusted shove. Absolutely pathetic. And with that, he stormed out, slamming my door shut with such force that the cheap frame rattled. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the nearest armchair, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My body was shaking uncontrollably, the adrenaline rush slowly receding, leaving behind a profound weariness. Yet, amidst the lingering fear and emotional exhaustion, a fragile seed of defiance had taken root. He was wrong. I wasn't pathetic, and I wasn't nothing. He had tried to break me, but he hadn't succeeded. Not entirely. As the tremors subsided, my mind, almost against my will, drifted back to Daniel. There was a secret, one I had buried so deep within myself that I rarely dared to unearth it. My heart, the real, true core of it, had once belonged completely to Daniel Thorne. But not just any Daniel Thorne. It was that Daniel Thorne, the one who would become Arthur's boss, the man Arthur constantly sought to impress, the man who eventually controlled the very career Arthur had so ruthlessly built. It was a truth I had suppressed for decades, a raw nerve I dared not touch. Daniel was the man who had made me feel truly alive, truly myself, before Arthur systematically dismantled my sense of self. And now, with a cruel, twisting sense of humor only fate could orchestrate, Daniel Thorne was about to re-enter my life. He was about to come back in a way that would unravel secrets Arthur never imagined, and force me to confront the reckless decision that had set me on this path. This decision, this buried past, would unexpectedly ignite the fire that would finally set me free. Stay with me, because what comes next is a story of rediscovery, resilience, and a reckoning that no one saw coming. Sarah, ever the loyal friend, insisted I needed to get out, to reclaim some semblance of normalcy. So, I found myself at a glittering charity gala, surrounded by people who once were my peers, now feeling like a stranger in my own skin. The vibrant chatter, the clinking of glasses, the scent of expensive perfume. It all felt distant, as if I were observing it from behind a pane of glass. My new dress, a thoughtful gift from Sarah, felt less like an embrace and more like a costume. Then I saw him. Across the room, amidst the swirling crowd, stood Daniel Thorne. Time had sculpted him, added layers of depth and wisdom, but hadn't fundamentally changed him. His hair was a distinguished silver at the temples, contrasting beautifully with the steady, piercing blue of his eyes. He carried himself with an innate strength, a quiet confidence that was entirely different from Arthur's bluster. Seeing him, the decades melted away instantly, and I was transported back to my 9-year-old self, barefoot in the summer grass, dreaming of a life with him. The air seemed to thin around me, my breath catching in my throat. Sarah, sensing my sudden stillness, followed my gaze. "Do you know him?" she whispered, a hint of curiosity in her voice. I could only nod. My voice caught somewhere in my chest. As if drawn by an invisible thread, Daniel turned his head, his eyes sweeping across the room until they landed on me. For a moment, a flicker of confusion crossed his face, quickly replaced by a profound recognition. Then relief. A small, genuine smile touched his lips, and without hesitation, he began to walk directly towards me, navigating the crowded room with a singular focus. "Eleanor," he said, his voice reaching me before he did. It was low, warm, and achingly familiar, a melody from a forgotten song. After all these years, he stood before me, his presence emanating a calm I hadn't felt in what felt like an eternity. We spoke in fragments, catching up on the vast expanse of time that separated us. Our words were careful, dancing around the edges of unspoken history. Yet each glance, each shared smile, hinted at the profound connection that still lingered. The ballroom faded into background noise, leaving only Daniel and me, in a bubble of rediscovered intimacy. Then, he lowered his voice, his eyes serious. "I regret letting you go, Eleanor. I regret it every day." The words, softly spoken, landed like stones in the quiet pool of my heart, stirring long-dormant emotions. It was in that tender, vulnerable moment that the air shifted again. A cold front seemed to sweep through the room, and I felt a prickle of dread. My eyes darted past Daniel's shoulder, and there he was. Arthur Sterling. He stood at the edge of the ballroom, a glass of champagne in his hand. His eyes locked on us. His usual public mask was replaced by a look of barely contained fury, yet a cruel, calculating smile played on his lips. He hadn't just seen us. He had witnessed the intimacy, the connection that still existed, and it ignited something dangerous in his gaze. "Is that?" Daniel started, following my gaze, his brows furrowing. "Yes," I confirmed, my voice a mere whisper. "That's Arthur." Daniel's hand gently touched my arm, his touch warm and grounding. "He can't hurt you here, Eleanor," he murmured, his thumb lightly stroking my skin. Not now. But I knew better. Arthur's presence alone was enough to inflict harm, a cold shadow stretching across any moment of happiness I dared to grasp. His silent fury was a promise of future retribution. I returned home that night, the echoes of Daniel's warm voice mingling with the chilling shadow of Arthur's glare. The exhilaration of seeing Daniel was intertwined with a new, terrifying certainty. Arthur's rage was far from finished. It was only just beginning. In the days that followed, a pervasive sense of unease settled over me. The feeling of being watched became constant, a phantom presence, a shadow at the periphery of my vision, the weight of unseen eyes, a faint, acrid trace of cigarette smoke lingering near my door, even though I didn't smoke. Then, I found it, tucked anonymously under my door. A single, stark white envelope. Inside, a chilling note, printed in block letters. "You will never belong to anyone else." I showed it to Sarah, my hands trembling. She was furious. "Eleanor, you have to go to the police. This is harassment, a threat." But I hesitated. I doubted they would take it seriously, that they would see it as anything more than a disgruntled ex-husband. I knew Arthur's cunning, his ability to manipulate appearances. I feared their response would be dismissive, leaving me even more vulnerable. Then, he invaded my home again. I woke suddenly, my heart leaping into my throat. Arthur stood at the foot of my bed, a dark silhouette against the faint light filtering in from the street. He hadn't broken in. He must have had a spare key, or perhaps the one he stole during his last visit. My breath hitched, paralyzing me. "You thought you could escape me, didn't you, Eleanor?" he whispered, his voice dangerously soft, yet laced with a chilling menace. "But you're mine. You'll always be mine." The next morning, I poured out everything to Sarah. "He was just standing there, Sarah." In my bedroom. The words came out in a rush, choked with terror. Her face paled. "Eleanor," she said, her voice firm. "If you don't protect yourself now, there might not be a later." Her words echoed the deep fear festering within me. Despite the raw terror that gripped me, a defiant spark flickered. I would not crumble. Not now. Not when Daniel had returned, a beacon of hope from a past I thought was lost. Arthur might try to break me, but he wouldn't succeed. Not anymore. I had to fight, not just for my safety, but for the rekindled possibility of a life I truly deserved. If you're finding Eleanor's story gripping, don't miss what happens next. Make sure to like, share this video, and subscribe to stay updated with her journey as she fights back against Arthur. The morning after Arthur's terrifying invasion, my small apartment, once a sanctuary, felt poisoned. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every creak of the floorboards sent a jolt of panic through me. My hands trembled as I tried to make coffee, the ceramic mug rattling against the saucer. The sense of violation was profound. The feeling that even my most private space was no longer safe. Just as the silence threatened to overwhelm me, my phone rang. It was Daniel. His voice, calm and steady, was like a balm. He sensed my distress immediately. "Eleanor? Are you all right? You sound off?" I took a shaky breath, the words tumbling out. "He was here, Daniel. Arthur. He came into my apartment last night. He was standing at the foot of my bed." There was a moment of shocked silence on the other end. Then Daniel's voice, firm and resolute. "I'm coming over. You're not staying there alone." True to his word, he arrived within minutes, his presence grounding me in a way I hadn't realized I desperately needed. He listened with a quiet intensity as I recounted the ordeal, his hand gently covering mine, offering silent reassurance. Sarah arrived shortly after, her face grim. "This is no longer about surviving day to day, Eleanor," she declared, her voice sharp with conviction. "This is about stopping him, before he does something irreversible." That evening, Daniel and Sarah accompanied me to the police station. I recounted everything: the threats, the chilling anonymous note, the invasion of my home. I spoke with a clarity born of renewed determination, laying bare the terror I had been living with. The officer, a young man with tired eyes, listened patiently, but his response was disheartening. "Mrs. Vance," he began. "Without physical evidence of a break-in or a direct act of violence, there's only so much we can do. He didn't harm you, did he?" He emphasized the last sentence, as if my terror wasn't harm enough. Sarah slammed her hand on the desk, the sound echoing in the sterile room. "So, a woman has to be bleeding before you'll protect her?" she accused, her voice filled with outrage. The officer merely shrugged, offering a platitude about due process. We left the station with no real help, no protection, just a sinking feeling of being utterly alone in this fight. Walking out into the cool night air, a profound anger began to replace my fear. I stared at the lock on my door, the one Arthur had so easily bypassed, and years of buried rage surged within me. It wasn't just about the current threats. It was about every slight, every control, every time he had made me feel less than, for decades. Daniel stayed with me, refusing to leave me alone. We talked late into the night. The conversation, a lifeline. As dawn broke, painting the sky with soft hues, he looked at me, his eyes earnest. "I'm not going to let him destroy you again, Eleanor," he promised, his voice unwavering. Arthur, emboldened by the lack of police action, escalated his campaign of intimidation. A wilted bouquet of roses, their petals already curling, appeared on my doorstep. It was a mocking gesture, a perverse symbol of his twisted possessiveness. Daniel found them, his jaw tightening, and disposed of them with a furious efficiency, as if purging a poison. His usual calm was cracking, revealing a protective fury I hadn't seen since our youth. "This has to end, Eleanor," he said, his voice taut with suppressed anger. "He's escalating. It's only going to get worse." 2 days later, Arthur ambushed me at the grocery store. I was reaching for a carton of milk when his voice, chillingly close, made me jump. "Enjoying the flowers, Eleanor?" he sneered, a triumphant glint in his eyes. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low, menacing whisper. "You think Daniel can protect you? He won't always be there. And when he isn't, you'll remember who really owns you." But this time, something was different. For the first time, I didn't flinch. I met his gaze, my own eyes holding a newfound strength. "You don't own me, Arthur," I responded, my voice clear and steady, devoid of the tremor that used to accompany my fear. "Not anymore." Just as the words left my lips, Daniel's voice cut through the air, sharp and authoritative. "Step away from her, Arthur." He had appeared seemingly out of nowhere, his presence radiating a fierce protectiveness. Arthur recoiled, his face contorting into a snarl of frustration and impotent rage, before he finally retreated, melting back into the crowded aisles. Later that day, Sarah, Daniel, and I sat in my small living room, plotting our next move. "We don't wait for the police anymore," Sarah declared, her fists clenched. Restraining order. Security cameras. A lawyer. Whatever it takes. We fight back, looking at her determined face, then at Daniel, whose unwavering support felt like a solid anchor. I realized something profound. My fear hadn't vanished entirely, but it had transmuted. It was no longer paralyzing, it was fuel. Arthur's pretense was entirely gone now, his mask of civility stripped away, revealing the dangerous, predatory man beneath. And I, Eleanor Vance, was ready to meet him head-on. Sleep became a fractured thing, a fragile membrane easily torn. Every night, before even attempting to close my eyes, I would meticulously double-check the locks, the windows, the chain on the door. I knew Arthur was unraveling, that his facade was crumbling, and that he was preparing for a final, desperate act. His escalation was palpable, a tightening coil of malevolent energy. Daniel, true to his word, remained a constant, vigilant presence. He checked in multiple times a day, often just appearing at my door to make sure I was safe. Sarah, meanwhile, became my personal archivist, meticulously compiling documentation of every incident, every message, every unsettling encounter. She left nothing to chance. Then came the night. It was pouring rain, a relentless drumming against my window pane, mirroring the frantic beat of my heart. A sudden, violent pounding erupted on my door. "Eleanor!" Arthur's voice was unnervingly calm, almost conversational, yet laced with a menace that sent shivers down my spine. "I know you're in there. Let me in." My hand instinctively reached for my phone. Speed dialing Daniel. "He's here," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the rain and the pounding. "Arthur's here." "Don't open the door, Eleanor." Daniel's voice came through, urgent and clear. "I'm 2 minutes away. Lock yourself in the bathroom if you have to." Arthur's calm shattered. "You think you can hide from me? You think you can replace me?" He roared, his voice distorted by rage. "If you ever think of seeing someone else, Eleanor, you'll see who I really am." His threats grew increasingly unhinged, spiraling into a terrifying torrent of possessiveness and fury. Remembering Sarah's insistent advice, I fumbled for the small digital recorder she had given me. Pressing the record button with a trembling thumb, I held it up, capturing every hateful, venomous word, every thud of his fist against my door. This was it. Undeniable proof. The pounding stopped abruptly. A chilling silence descended, broken only by the relentless rain. Then, a new sound, more terrifying than the shouts. The faint metallic scrape of something forcing against the lock. He was trying to break in. Just as a primal scream formed in my throat, shouts erupted from the hallway. Not Arthur's. Daniel's. I heard the scuffle, the grunt of exertion, and then Daniel's voice, a low, guttural growl that was utterly unlike his usual calm demeanor. "Get away from her, Arthur, or I swear to God, I'll end this tonight." Peeking out through the peephole, I saw Daniel, drenched and furious, pinning Arthur against the rain-slicked hallway wall. Clara Jenkins' door was open a crack, her concerned face peering out, along with another neighbor. Arthur's face was a mask of utter defeat and rage, his elegant public persona completely crumbled. He struggled, spitting a final, venomous threat towards my closed door. "This isn't over, Eleanor. You can't erase me." But his bravado faltered as the unmistakable wail of police sirens began to approach, growing louder with each second. With a final, desperate shove against Daniel, Arthur broke free and fled, disappearing down the emergency stairwell just as the police rounded the corner. I opened the door, my entire body shaking, and fell into Daniel's arms. He held me tight, his own body trembling slightly from the confrontation, a silent anchor in my storm. Sarah, who had arrived moments after Daniel, rushed forward, the small recorder clutched in her hand. She marched straight to the lead officer. "You wanted evidence?" she said, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "Here it is." Every threat, every word. And Clara, our neighbor, saw him too. Standing there, in the aftermath, with Daniel's arms around me and Sarah's fierce advocacy, something shifted within me. It wasn't just fear I felt. It was a profound sense of power. The terror was no longer mine to carry alone. I had confronted it, and I had witnesses, allies. Days later, Sarah, true to her word, filed for an emergency protective order against Arthur, armed with my recording and Clara's witness statement. The police, finally with undeniable evidence, took action. 2 nights later, they found Arthur lurking near my building, not just with ill intent, but with a knife. He was arrested. Finally, I watched through my window as they dragged him away, his hands cuffed behind his back. He caught my eye, his hateful stare burning into me, promising eternal vengeance. But this time, I didn't flinch. I held his gaze, unblinking, until he was gone, swallowed by the flashing lights and the darkness of the night. Slowly, gradually, relief began to seep into my bones. Daniel's steady presence, his quiet understanding, his small acts of love, a shared meal, a comforting hand, a gentle smile, began to mend the raw wounds left by decades of abuse. Sarah, ever the warrior, continued to pursue legal action, making sure Arthur faced the full consequences of his actions. He built his life on intimidation, she often said. But intimidation only works until someone refuses to bow. One sunny afternoon, Daniel took me back to the park we used to frequent in our youth. We sat on a bench, the rustling leaves a gentle counterpoint to our silence. "You know," he said, turning to me, his eyes filled with warmth. "I remember that girl who used to dream of traveling the world, writing stories. Maybe you don't have to go back to being her. Maybe you're someone stronger now, Eleanor." His words resonated deep within me. I was building someone new, brick by painful brick. Scarred, yes, but unburned. The flames of Arthur's rage had not consumed me. They had forged me. That night, in the quiet solitude of my apartment, I lit a single candle. It wasn't for Arthur, or for what was lost. It was for my survival, for my courage, for my newfound freedom. Arthur's war was over, because I no longer played his game. The silence that now filled my home was not empty. It was peace. As the dust settled from Arthur's arrest and the subsequent legal proceedings, a different kind of quiet descended upon my life. It was a healing quiet, one that allowed space for introspection and, eventually, a new kind of growth. Just as I was beginning to find my footing, a call came that I never truly expected. It was Emily. My daughter's voice, tentative at first, then breaking with emotion, filled my small apartment. "Mom," she began, a choked sob catching in her throat. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For being so distant. For not being there for you." Her words, raw with regret, brought tears to my eyes. Years of unspoken pain, of a fractured relationship that had been a constant ache in my heart, suddenly felt ready to surface. I listened, holding back my own grief, as Emily poured out her heart. She spoke of her struggles, of growing up in Arthur's shadow, of his subtle yet insidious manipulation. She revealed how Arthur had systematically turned her against me, planting seeds of doubt, filling her head with lies about my character, my supposed extravagance, and my emotional instability. He had painted a picture of me as selfish and demanding, making her believe that his hardships were largely my fault. "He always made me feel like I had to choose, Mom," Emily confessed, her voice thick with unshed tears. "And then, when I got older, he started controlling me financially. He'd threatened to cut me off, to ruin my career prospects, if I ever got too close to you, if I ever questioned him." The revelation hit me with a profound sadness. I had always blamed myself, wondering what I had done to push my daughter away. Now I understood. Emily wasn't just a bystander. She too had been a victim of Arthur's pervasive manipulation and control. My anger, once solely directed at him for his betrayal of me, now burned with renewed intensity for the way he had poisoned my relationship with our daughter. Emily then shared her own recent heartbreak. Her divorce. He was just like Dad. Mom, she admitted, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Charming on the outside, but controlling and critical underneath. It was like I was repeating your story, but I didn't even realize it until it was too late. We spoke for hours, our conversation a delicate dance between apology and understanding, blame and forgiveness. It was a tearful, honest conversation, the first truly open one we had shared in decades, and with each word, a piece of our fractured relationship began to mend. I don't know how you did it, Mom, Emily said, her voice filled with a newfound admiration. How you finally found the strength to leave him, to stand up to him. I couldn't. I told her it wasn't easy, that it took years, and the unwavering support of friends. I confessed my own fears, my moments of doubt, and the profound loneliness I had experienced. It was a bittersweet reunion, marked by the pain of lost years, but brimming with the hope of rebuilding our bond, brick by brick, with honesty and love. We made plans to see each other, to start anew, not as mother and daughter defined by Arthur's shadow, but as two women who had survived similar battles. With Emily back in my life, a new energy surged through me. The small apartment, once a symbol of my reduced circumstances, now felt like a blank canvas. I began to rediscover old passions I had long abandoned in my life with Arthur, who saw them as frivolous distractions. I bought a set of watercolor paints, the vibrant colors a stark contrast to the muted tones of my recent past. I dusted off my old camera, a relic from my college days, and started taking long walks, capturing the beauty in the ordinary, the way the light hit a crumbling brick wall, the intricate patterns of leaves after a rain shower. I even enrolled in local art classes, something I would have never dared to do under Arthur's disapproving eye. The studio, filled with the scent of oil paint and turpentine, became a sanctuary. There, surrounded by fellow creatives, I found a joy in simply making, in expressing myself without judgment. Daniel, always my gentle encourager, appreciated this authentic blossoming. He would often look at my sketches, truly seeing them, and say, "This is the real Eleanor. This is who you always were, just waiting to be set free." Sarah and Clara, my steadfast pillars of support, were ecstatic. They celebrated my renewed spirit, constantly reminding me of my worth, of the vibrant, intelligent woman Arthur had tried so hard to diminish. "You've always been strong, Eleanor," Sarah would say. "You just needed to remember it." As I painted and photographed, as I reconnected with Emily, and nurtured my burgeoning relationship with Daniel, a profound sense of purpose began to emerge. Something beyond mere survival. My journey, from subservience to liberation, from fear to defiance, felt like it held a greater meaning. I realized that my story, my hard-won freedom, could serve as an inspiration to others who might be trapped in similar situations. The thought of transforming my pain into empowerment, of sharing my journey to light a path for someone else, took root. I started researching local women's shelters, contemplating volunteering, perhaps even sharing my story in a public forum. Stripped bare of shame, my journey was, indeed, a testament to resilience, to the quiet power of finding strength in vulnerability, and to the undeniable truth that even after decades of being silenced, a woman's voice can still rise, clear and strong. My journey of rediscovery, fueled by a burgeoning creativity, began to gain unexpected momentum. My art, once a private solace, started to resonate beyond my apartment walls. A small gallery, tucked away in a quiet part of town, offered me an opportunity for a local exhibition. The thought filled me with both exhilaration and a familiar nervousness. But with Daniel's gentle encouragement and Sarah's unwavering belief, I accepted. The exhibition itself was a revelation. My paintings and photographs, raw and honest, depicted not just landscapes and still lifes, but the emotional terrain of my life. The muted grays of isolation, the vibrant bursts of defiance, the soft hues of rediscovered hope. Each piece was a powerful expression of my journey, a testament to healing through creation. Standing among my works, I felt a sense of vindication, a declaration of my reclaimed voice. Emily was there, beaming with pride, her arm linked with a kind, steady man she introduced as her new partner. They held hands, their smiles genuine and unburdened, a stark contrast to the strained interactions I had witnessed in her previous marriage. Seeing her happy, truly happy, filled me with a warmth that transcended years of heartache. Daniel stood quietly by my side throughout the evening, his presence a comforting anchor, his eyes reflecting a quiet pride that spoke volumes. Clara Jenkins, resplendent in a lavender dress, came with a fresh batch of her famous cookies, her face radiating joy at my transformation. Later, Sarah raised a glass, her eyes sparkling with tears. To Eleanor, she announced, her voice ringing clear, who reminds us all that resilience isn't just surviving, it's thriving. To courage, to second chances, and to finding your own beautiful voice. The exhibition was a success, not just in sales, but in the connections it forged. It was then that I truly began to embrace the idea of sharing my story more broadly. I started by joining a local women's support group, initially just to listen. But soon I found myself speaking, sharing fragments of my life with Arthur, the fear, the isolation, and then the slow, arduous path to freedom. The profound connection I felt with these women, their shared experiences of pain and resilience, solidified my belief that my story could indeed provide strength and hope to others. We were not alone. My relationship with Daniel deepened, blossoming into something truly beautiful. It was a love built not on youthful infatuation or desperate need for stability, but on mutual respect, shared values, and a profound understanding of each other's journeys. We found joy in the simple moments. Quiet evenings cooking together, long walks in the park, conversations that stretched late into the night, free from the shadows of the past. He never tried to fix me. He simply loved me, scars and all, allowing me the space to be my authentic self. I embraced my new identity, Eleanor Vance, artist, friend, survivor. I owned my experiences without shame, recognizing that true value came from within, from the integrity of my spirit, not from external validation or the trappings of a superficial life. The sprawling mansion I once occupied with Arthur, the luxurious cars, the exclusive social circles, none of it held any allure for me anymore. My worth was inherent, not derived from external possessions or associations. With the proceeds from the exhibition and the final, belated settlement from Arthur's estate, which Sarah had meticulously pursued, I decided to sell my small apartment. It had been a stepping stone, a necessary refuge, but I was ready for something more. I bought a charming little house on the edge of town, complete with a neglected but promising garden. Tending to that garden became a metaphor for my life, carefully nurturing fragile sprouts, weeding out the invasive, thorny memories, planting seeds of hope and beauty. But my transformation didn't stop at personal peace. Remembering the helplessness I felt at the police station and the immense support I received from Sarah and Clara, I decided to channel my experience into action. I established a small foundation, in honor of Clara and Sarah, dedicated to supporting women escaping abusive situations, providing legal aid, safe housing, and emotional support. It was a modest beginning, but it was my legacy, a tangible manifestation of my belief in empowerment and second chances. Today, I feel a profound sense of peace and purpose. Arthur's shadow has finally lifted, replaced by the warmth of genuine connection and self-acceptance. My past is no longer a burden to be hidden, but a testament to the strength of the human spirit. I am not merely surviving. I am thriving. I am looking forward, a woman reborn, ready to embrace a future she truly deserves, a future built on authenticity, love, and the unwavering conviction that every life, no matter how broken, can be rebuilt, more beautiful and resilient than before. If you are listening to this, and you are trapped in a similar situation, please know this. You are not alone. There is help. There is hope. Reach out. Speak up. Never give up on the possibility of a life truly free and truly yours. Your story is not over. It's just beginning.